To go, Joy? Yeah. Okay. Thank you to everyone in the room. Thanks to everyone viewing live on Facebook. So my name is Aaron. I'm one of the adult librarians here, and I set up this program. I got a little spiel, and then I'm going to get out of the way. Try to keep this quick so we can focus on our presenters. My goal in organizing tonight's event was to highlight some amazing new voices and to pinpoint how their work as writers fits into their sense of self within the communities they're connected to. Each of our authors tonight are embedded in multiple communities, and their writing skills are just one strength among many. Darius Simpson is joining us digitally from Oakland, California. He is a writer, educator, performer, and a skilled living room dancer based originally in Akron, Ohio. He received his BA in political science from Eastern Michigan here and his MFA in creative writing and poetry from Mills College out in Oakland. Darius was a recipient of the 2020 Ruth Lilly and Dorothy Sargent Rosenberg Poetry Fellowship, and just this year he won the 2023 National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellowship. These are two of the largest awards available to poets in the United States. He is also the author of Never Catch Me. I have a copy here in the library. His previous book was called Conversion Theory. Both are available here. Never Catch Me came out through Button Poetry, so that's available online. Jenna Dawson, right over here, is the author of a new children's picture book called What is Kindness? She has lived between Ann Arbor and Ypsilanti her whole life and is a mom to 2 young kids. Jenna has credentials in early child development and was working at a local nature school where their inclusive beliefs in an authentic childhood inspired her to write What is Kindness? In addition to all this, Jenna is the driving force behind a local organization called Care Seats of Michigan. She is certified in child passenger safety. You can visit Jenna and other folks at one of the monthly pullover prevention workshops that happen every month in the area for a child seat safety inspection or to receive a donated seat if you need one. Kayla Chenault, our third presenter, from her own words, is a practitioner of Black Girl Magic and holds a master's in creative writing from EMU. When she is not writing, Kayla is found at the museums where she works or telling everybody about the history of popular music and social dance. She is a former line editor and contributing writer for Cecile's Writers, which is a literary e-zine that publishes writing by intercultural writers. Her debut novel, These Bones, boom, it's a work of historical horror published in September of 2021, which has received a starred review from Publishers Weekly, as well as being a Forward Indies Award Gold winner for literary fiction. Third, Desiree Simmons, feel free to hop on in. Desiree is going to be our conversation moderator for tonight. She's a local poet, a co-director of the Interfaith Council for Peace and Justice, and city council member representing Ward 3 here in Ypsilanti. So for tonight's event, our goal is for each author to have about 20 to 25 minutes to speak about themselves and showcase some of their work. And all remaining time will be devoted to a group conversation with everybody. That's all from me. Thanks to all our presenters, our moderator, and all of my library crew for making this possible. Thanks, y'all. Great. Darius, are you cool with going first? Can we unmute him?
Word. Hey y'all, my name is Jeremy.
Wait a second, guys. Speak now, Darius.
Hello.
Okay, this will work. Okay.
Mic check.
All
1,
right.
2, 1, 2.
Darius. Darius, we're good.
Oh, you said y'all good? Oh, sorry. Didn't hear you. Hello. This is trippy. My name is Darius. I am a poet, and yep, wrote the books, have the words in the places. So it's just so funny to be like, I think I'm stationed in a different place than the screen is. I'm like looking at people, look at me. Is that what's happening? That's crazy. Sorry, I'm a child and easily distracted, so I'm like, what is going on? But word, appreciate y'all pulling up. Whoever has pulled up, shout out to the other authors, and that person is going to be moderating a conversation. The poems I'm going to do are from my book, Never Catch Me. You can hit up bookstores, or if you are fancy and want to contact me directly for a book, you can do that too for a signed copy. Holla at me on Instagram or whatever. I want to start with a quote. The Black artist's role in America is to aid in the destruction of America as he knows it. Amiri Baraka. Tell my mama that I'm up before 6 a.m. plotting escape from the empire again, throwing rocks at a man-made apocalypse, practicing my slingshot stance, trying to play dominoes with giants, trying to topple puppet governments. I am about 3 decades late for therapy. I'm the 3rd generation off the plantation. I got this bad habit of maroon conspiracies. I got an attraction to new African landscapes. I got this mean 2-step for the after party. I try to tell the law nothing of substance, but tell the people everything I can. I tell no lies cause it's raining pig tongues. Claim no easy way out cause back doors break too. It's a whole lot of textbook revolutionaries. It's a whole lot of part-time freedom fighters making full-time money off the fact that they survived the 60s. My father told me to be quiet and keep my head down. Well, I keep that in mind behind sandbag barricades. My poems mean absolutely nothing if you don't see me. Outside is calling for a new kind of artist, you know, one who knows the importance of spare mags, one who knows the importance of food programs, you know, one who don't back down from defense, one who knows there's a time for canvas and there's a time to make political art out of a jawline. I'm from Ohio, but currently I live just east of a contradiction, where clumps of knotted human hair skip excitedly over sidewalk cracks in pairs. Screeching tires scrape murals into over-patrolled crosswalk paint. City trimmers and zip codes shaken loose from indigenous childhoods. I don't know if y'all heard or not, but colonialism don't respect finders keepers. It says that all's fair in genocide, except self-defense. Right now, there are humans too familiar with the politics of thunderstorm forecasts. Squalor sitting right next door to neighborhood-sized apartment buildings, half-empty baby bottles rolling over broken glass under the freeway. There's brand new cop cars taking victory laps around decade-old encampments. There's dead grass grappling with the distance between beating hearts, piles of repurposed couch cushions. There is bench warrants covered in sewage. Climate crisis is absolutely disgusted with how many people we let pile on the curb, while profits skyrocket for empty housing units, while a high rise falls out the chapped lips of an investor. Okay, I'm not really sure how leasing works. I got my degree in human decency. I'm not really up on the latest ethics for ownership. All my friends keep space on the couch and a spare blanket. We all push the weight limit of a Honda Civic and there is always room. Monday is a good excuse to shoplift under capitalism. Yesterday was sufficient evidence to stack bricks outside the courthouse. Yesterday was sufficient evidence to stack bricks outside the mayor's kitchen window. 1970s criminal records are waiting for academics to put on work boots. Now, I'm not sure what's tradition and what's legal anymore, but at some point, y'all, I'm sick of this has got to lead us to get rid of city council, lest we be made of plastic promises too, lest the young have a bone to pick, lest that bone come from our inactive skeletons, lest there be no lands left to pick a fight on. I blame the suffering last for how they survived the winter. I blame the governor for flooded highways and raining ash. I blame poverty on vegan diet commercials and yoga studios. I blame police for lead pipes and poisoned middle school history lessons. I blame police for all the mornings my father bit his tongue on the job. I blame police for my lazy eye twitch and my obsessive desire to produce. I even blamed the sheriff's office last week when I stubbed my toe. It left this iron star-shaped blood stain in my sock. Now I'm gonna read some poems from the book. This is the book. If you haven't seen it or can't see it right now, this is what it looks like. Ooh. Shout out to my friend Deanne. She did the cover image. We both went to Eastern Michigan University. Gang, gang. And more poems. This poem's called Last Call. I say I need to drink less, and tonight is the third night in a row that my left hand is a short glass of whiskey. Does that make me a liar or an escape artist? And does it really make a difference on a San Francisco Sunday where the shoreline is coughing up hazmat suits, haze of unclearing throats meandering toward a blue-pink gold Pacific backdrop? N95 means more to civilians now than it should. Election season means we may not make it to the ballot, and perhaps this disaster was man-made. Perhaps if we had emptied more magazines in the right direction, there would be less obituaries on the east side this morning. My therapist, who is neither licensed nor a therapist, speaks fluent empty shot glass, exchanges horror stories from the work week across a wooden countertop confessional. He asks, "What you running from?" I say, "You right, pour another one and watch me never run anywhere again. Either it goes down gasoline or ice water." Our session ends with my legs stuttering onto a dance floor, part wobble, but mostly floating toward the sweet spot in the crowd, where bent knees begat spiraling backs, where sweat is offered up in praise to the DJ's intuition. Hooked elbows swung around the neck of my new best friend, who was a stranger 30 seconds ago, until that one song when the entire venue faded to background noise while we, new gods of salted skin, uncles who inherited the groove from our grandfathers, backyard two-step practitioners, challenged by, "What you know about this?" and trained to kill that shit, fastened our eyes on the precision of each other's pop lock, mirrored Lean with Rock and Harlem Shake with Dougie. One of us cast an spell while the other spun the floor into red carpet, twisted the air into a Thanksgiving kitchen human. Liquor has a funny way of ironing the wrinkles out of introductions. So 3 or 4 hours or shots or bathroom breaks in, there we were, bouncing limbs in the middle of no one's living room. For a split second, thought we might have been immortal if we just drank enough midnight. But we know what moonlight does to Black functions when the music stops. What uniformed wolves linger beyond the overwhelming exchange between bass drum and eardrum. How quickly the end of a song can bleed into a more lasting quiet. Happy endings are for white women. Glass slippers were invented by white men. Glass slippers make for a messy dance floor, make it hard to run from sirens. do a couple more poems, get out y'all way. Been a while since I've done that one. No. This is my first time like reading the book aloud this year. So shout out to us in this space and the collective experience of thumbing through and choosing poems. Proud of us. We're doing great.
Thank you.
What'd you say?
I said thank you. You're doing awesome,
poem's-
guys.
I appreciate you. This poem is called What We Doing Here. I guess I can give the context. There's a poet named Tongo Eisen Martin, a dear friend. He has a line in a poem. It goes, "What we doing here? Surviving, baby, for no reason in particular." And I really love that quote so much I got it tatted on my forearm. And so this poem takes its title from that first question. What we doing here? I wanted to be a good poet once. I tossed a handful of haikus at a cop, and he laughed. My MFA advisor says that ain't what poems are for. But these days, I don't want to make art that can't also be a weapon against oppressors, that can't double as an invitation to organize. This is not me making excuses for bad poems. This is a critique of how we become experts, a question of how that expertise can be used by the people who will die tomorrow with little food in the stomach or fridge or family. These days, all my dreams involve comrades. Last night, I had a wild one about liberation. There was people outside everywhere. Then, when it got cold, we all went inside. Every single one of us had an inside. The end. I had a wacky idea about education yesterday, that we should all know the best things for free. I had a nightmare about my kin last week. They were rotting in prisons and boardrooms and coffins and courtrooms and all equally lifeless. Revolution is the process of organized reanimation. To admit that somebody killed you centuries ago and everything since has been apocalyptic reiteration. Call me American if you want to hear God choke. Call me New African if you want to petrify colonialism. Wow. I can also share with y'all because we're being super vulnerable here in this space where I can't see you, but you can see me. There's a lot of poems in the book that I was like, what? Y'all gonna let me publish? You know, I was expecting fully when I sent like, I don't know how many of y'all are familiar with the process of publishing, but like in a lot of cases, in all cases, somebody gonna read that shit before you publish it unless you self-publish. And so like when I sent it off, the first draft, I was like, oh yeah, they're gonna like say, they're gonna mark the poems and tell me you can publish with us, but these poems are not gonna make it. But that didn't happen. And so there's a lot of poems that I'm flipping through. I'm like, it's that. It's amazing. What's relevant to today? Okay, I'm gonna do like 2 more poems. I know I'm taking a long time to just flip through. That's what happens when I can't see y'all, but I forget y'all there and I'm just kind of like enjoying it. But, enjoying my time, like I'm sitting here on my own. I'm like, damn, okay, let me just keep flipping through. Thinking all the thoughts. So this is a poem. I don't know how big the screen is, but the idea is that you can see there's like 2 parts to it. Like there's a list of words on the left and then some text on the right. I started doing publishing shit and like, I'm sorry, can I cuss? I don't know if this is like a kid friendly.
You can cuss.
Oh, okay, for sure. I said the shit in the poem and I was like, oh damn, I didn't ask. So that was a lot of curse words all at once. But this was the first poem that was published from the book. I started doing publishing things in like April 2020, like submitting to journals and see. Now I'm still starting like okay, and shit. Like I'd never done that before, and this was the first poem to be accepted. And so I'm gonna read it. some important context, I guess, which comes down as like a footnote in the poem too, if you ever see it online, or in the book once you get your book. Victor Steen is a name of a Black boy who was murdered by pigs in 2009 in Florida. His story is something that stuck out to me. One of the questions that kept coming up in my master's, the MFA, which stands for Masters of Fine Arts, was what's haunting you? And walking into that program, I had like taken a stance of I'm gonna stop writing about Black trauma because we've had enough. Which is like righteous, no disrespect to people that get to that stage and that point. But I don't think it was entirely historically accurate nor helpful, because it was like a denial of what was haunting me. And so like that question in that program allowed for me to revisit this thing, i.e. Colonialism expressing itself through state violence, particularly the murders of Black, brown, and indigenous people from pigs. Revisit the subject in a new way and from a new lens, a more creative way that didn't feel like I was just going up there and saying, we're, trying to ring the alarms, which is like my natural inclination. I don't know if I can tell. I'm like naturally just boom, address a thing as it comes up and kind of zoom it out. So anyway, this is called Ma'am, I'm sorry to tell you, your son is dangerously good at freeze tag, like ghost good, drenched in red puddles, but on his way, down by the gutter river, ditched laundry beside the sewer hole, drumming water's edge lullabies with his mouth on a curve, delivering ripples upstream, dizzy sawdust scattered in moonlit dewgrass, devil horn handsome, should model for caskets, drunken squiggles soaking cement, dye staining black tar as we speak, drawing graffiti on his stomach with paint from his stomach, decoration for this holiday you'll never forget and never celebrate, deflated bounce house blocking traffic, deer shown in headlights mimicking boyhood, dirt pinned between the tracks of my tires, doomed, dough kneaded into sidewalk cracks, driftwood floating in molasses, driftwood spinning in spine sap, driftwood sinking by the minute, dancing, dandelion seed stolen from stem by some invisible unforgiving, dense weight in exchange for a shorter shift, dummy after a crash test, dripped in gold sweat. If you don't come collect him, the bank will deposit his remains as a non-graduation gift. Definitely strong as he looks, double tough as steel beams. Ma'am, I threw my car at him and he didn't even flinch. Matter of fact, it's been 2 days and he hasn't moved any of his limbs. Footnote 1. Cop cars may be used as a weapon if deemed necessary force. Footnote 2. On October 3rd, 2009, 17-year-old Victor Steen was murdered while on his bicycle after being tased and subsequently run over by a police officer in Pensacola, Florida. His mother did not find out her son had been murdered by pigs until almost 2 days later. I think that story is important to hold given the murder of Keenan Anderson in Los Angeles recently. Given last year was the highest rate or highest number of police killing to date, or since 2014, I think. And that like pushing back against what I was talking about earlier with this repetitive nature of saying the same thing, and how that song actually can't change. You know, if it is the poet's duty, the artist's duty to reflect the times, if the times ain't changing, you know, we can't change our art because this shit gets uncomfortable, you know, or we get tired of the dying. If we are actually tired of the dying, it means we might get into something else, you know, that we haven't tried besides the art or alongside the art. And so, yeah, wanted to, I was undecided if I was going to read that poem, but some hopefully helpful context on why I decided to. I think I'm gonna do like 3 more poems. Is there time for that?
I was like, maybe say
I could
one
listen to
more.
all of your poetry.
Yeah, I mean, like,
Just turn this event into a Terry's.
Yeah. fine.
Yes,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay.
Because there was, again, I can't see y'all. There were so many voices. I was like, which voice do I listen to? Because what if the person that really had the decision-making power was quietly like, no, but everybody else is like, yeah, you know?
There's more time. The decision-making lady says there's more time.
Yes.
For sure. We'll see. I'm gonna read like 3 more. I should go to the table of contents now that I know what I'm looking for. Okay. For me, understanding that pigs murdering people was Black people in particular was an issue happened in 2014. I was working on campus and Mike Brown had just been murdered, and I was trying to keep up with the story, but I didn't know his name, and so I couldn't remember his name. It hadn't been I hadn't heard it repeated or seen it repeated enough to where it stuck out. And so I was like, oh, what was that? And then, you know, typing into the Google, Black boy killed by police. And what that brought up was this whole host of other cases and some videos. And so, you know, I wasn't around or alive during, I think, no, I was born later that year, but Rodney King was brutalized. And so I hadn't really seen video of anything. And so before like this shit started going viral and all that, before even video was released of the brief interaction with Mike Brown, I saw this video while trying to keep up with that one. And I was like, damn, wait, that was 2009? And I was like, well, shit, if this is 2014, that was 2000, how long is this going on? So like that shot me off into a whole other realm of realizing and understanding how crucial the murder and brutalization of Black people is to the function of police and policing. And so because of that, how long it has continued and how many stories there are. I was reading Revolutionary Suicide, which is a book by Huey Newton. And for the folks who don't know, Huey co-founded the Black Panthers in 1966. And he writes about how early on in his organizing, folks were talking about community, what is it called? Community review boards for police. And that shit blew my mind because, like, you know, last year, 2 years ago, we talking about we just need to do community oversight. And just coming back to this idea of repetitive stories and repetitive actions. And I think about how, you know, the oppressors and their security forces are very clear about what they're going to do, right? And I think it is important for us maybe not to change the fact that we're responding to it. And so whether poetry, whether organizing or political education, but maybe how we're going about it and the tactics. So yeah, for me, Victor Steen is like that was like my moment of like, damn, this is our reality. So this is another poem that is ruminating on that. It's called Impact, a run-on question. I want to tell you about the first time I watched pigs trample him, but I've already written that funeral. And yes, my cheeks were flooded stairwells when black and white dash cam footage crushed me. Because I could have swore his bike was cherry red. And so was mine, before the paint chipped off, before the right foot pedal split off in the speeding mouth of a Toyota Camry. And I want to tell you about the fourth time I watched pigs flatten him. But I got hit by a car when I was 9, so talking about accidents makes my foot itch, and maybe there's no accidental way to run through a person, like an inconvenient red light or a shortcut, and maybe I'm making up excuses because I never been to Pensacola, Florida, and the video was still too close to home, and I was 6 houses down from mine when a green sedan bent the fragile spine of my bike backwards into dead curbside grass. And I was a 5-minute walk from my apartment when I saw the video, or when I watched pigs deflate him for the 8th time. And the day I got hit, my mother told my siblings to wait for me, but I'm the youngest, so they left. Anyway, and my loyalty is hard-headed, so I need explicit rejection, often chasing behind people that don't want me around. So I darted after them, and he was riding his bike alone that night too, And in the video, it looked like he had lost someone. And the first thing I thought was how much trouble awaited me for the dents in my twisted handlebars. And the second thought was if I would be allowed to ride my bike alone again, and a Black neighbor sprinted outside and wound her arms around my head like I was hers. And I just know that that night, no one hugged him or said he was gonna be okay. And what's a Black boy alone on a bike in the near night anyway, huh? And what good would it do? Telling you about how there was no blood, but still enough questions to fill a casket. And where was I going with that bike? Or his name, or this grief, or an almost elegy? And what is an obituary from a stranger anyway? And gonna do 2 more poems. In response, it's so funny that I mentioned that I keep writing about police violence, and then I just realized this, both these, yep. The trend continues. I'm an honest person. In response to the murder of Hakeem Littleton, a very well-meaning person says, you know, he shot at the police, right? You know, he might not have had his hands up. You know, he did not mentor at-risk teenagers after school. You know, his license was suspended and his taillights shattered. You know, he wasn't wearing a lick of white when they found him, had his pants sagging, had his shirt untucked, had his lips unbuckled, dripping Southern twang all on the concrete. It sounded like a mouthful of honeybees was stuck at the top of his throat. You know he was Black. Like black, like dark roast coffee beans Black, like ashy knuckles cradling a bottle of wild Irish rose on the sidewalk Black, like Scarecrow perched just outside that liquor store doorway Black, like purple tar gums and gold teeth, like paper bag hands and menthol breath, like empty Black and Mild wrappers stuffed in the glove compartment. I heard it wasn't even blood where they left him. I heard it was just stains of red Kool-Aid. I heard it was just puddles of strawberry pop fizz. You know, Sugar would have got him if 12 didn't. You know, his teeth were little yellowing daggers. You know, he was a dragon, returned fire, went out in a puff of smoke. You know, he was a weapon, didn't beg for his life or call for his mother or his partner. You know, that nigga went out on his feet, brought a gun to a gunfight, brought mutiny to a slave ship at the Atlantic shoreline. You know, that nigga was a nigga. And not like, haha, nigga. Not like next Democratic presidential nominee, nigga. Not like run fast, jump high, nigga. Like worm food covered in tree bark. Like lead water clogging an artery, like dead leaves stuck in a gutter, like storm the arsenal and shoot the masters. He was one of those give me liberty or give me blood types. That nigga had the nerve to want freedom and then go do something about it. And still, what y'all gonna march for him? What would Malcolm X's old zoot suit think? What would a white woman's rendition of Dr. King think? What would the noose say? What if they see us mourning and then think we just as dangerous as him? What if I say liberation and they think I mean I hate America? What if I hate America but don't know no other homeland? Shit, what if America hates me back and does something about it, but doesn't give me time to shoot first? So in the event that America is indeed America and does what America does, if I'm caught between a badge and a hard place, 3 hours after the streetlights turn on? Will you church it? Will you pass it along pews of almost saints until it reaches the whole congregation? Will you tithe it? Will you stretch it thin like goat skin over the shell of a djembe drum? Will you slap it? Will you let the echo dance naked in the wet cave of your throat? Will you bark it? Will you sing it like my mother is listening? Will you inhale until your lungs nearly burst, then inhale some more, then inhale some more, then and only then will y'all say my name? Will you put some stank on it? Will you juke joint James Brown it? Will you Jerry Curl spray it? Now, how can I rest in peace or power if y'all get all lazy-lipped when you're talking about me? Will you scoop it thick? Will you stir it slow? Will you mac and cheese it? Will you to spread the savory over your tongue? Will you let it marinate? Will you serve it with Sunday dinner? If you say my name and cast iron skillets don't start to rattling, that mean you ain't say it loud enough. Will you say it again? If an oak tree don't split open from the trunk, that mean you ain't pronounce it right. Will you say it again? Will you redecorate this city in streams of fire after me? Will you paint downtown a scorching hue? Will you stain the sky in black smoke? Will you tell ghost stories over the ashes of this empire? Will you scream it? Will you stand out in the clutter of some rush hour traffic to let these motherfuckers know what kind of boots I wore? Will you stomp it into the soil of the last place where I laughed with my whole body? Will you dance it? Will you Saturday night praise it? Will you tambourine it? Will you drunken favorite song shout it? Will you full moon howl? Will you shriek? Will you moan? Will you chant? Will you live? Will you fight? Will y'all cry? Will you cry for me? Will you? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Darius. We're going to take a moment to try to edit the live to have
exciting.
friends who are viewing from home. It should show up on the library's public page correctly. And we do still have Darius' session recorded, so that'll be part of the finished video.
Were you wanting to do one more, or should we go on to the next one?
Darius, are you okay with us hopping to the next speaker?
You
Cool.
done?
Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.
All right, so next we're gonna have Jenna
Oh gosh.
sharing.
Hi. My name is Jenna. Hi. I was born and raised in Ipsy. Pre-pandemic, 20 minutes wasn't enough to talk about myself. Post-pandemic, I'll just read my book and then we'll go from there. I wrote this for my 2 children while I was a preschool teacher, because it's important to know what kindness is.
So hold on, Jenna, we're gonna set up, I think we need this mic for the in-house speakers.
Ooh,
Up
fancy.
here, and feel free to hold it up because this is where people see it. This up here close to her. Yeah.
Can I see it?
Yeah.
Kind of. Okay. What is kindness? Do you know? Is it someplace you can go? Is it something you can grow? Is it something you can find in the garden and bring inside? Is it someone you can invite to a party late at night? Is kindness an animal, like a kitten or a bird? No, that's absurd. Kindness is a feeling you have because maybe your friend is sad. You can't take their sadness away, but you can ask if they're okay. And if they're not, you can love them anyway. Kindness is a choice you make to give your friend a little break. Maybe they made you really mad, but that doesn't mean your friend is bad. Just give your friend some space to be. They'll come back eventually. You'll see. Show some kindness every day and your friends will follow you. They'll see kindness everywhere and know exactly what to do. Kindness comes from sincerity. It's knowing you're there to care. It's more than holding doors ajar and offering food to share. Kindness is thoughtful, honest, and loving. It's hugs, words, and being there. This is my favorite page, by the way. The illustrator, just it's my favorite page because it's so pretty. This is kindness. Two of these children are designed after the likeness of my own two children, Sam and Grace, who I've dedicated the book to. This third child, their name is Alex. I have a book, the next book that I plan to illustrate, it's written. It's my next project. That'll be out hopefully next year. But it's a book about that character. I wrote that for my best friend, Anna. I have a couple other books lined up, a book about parenting, because parenting is hard. And like, we don't get a manual, and I decided I was gonna write a manual, and it's gonna be here, I'm sure, because I'm gonna donate to the library. Thanks. I don't really know what else to say. Oh, I do manage Care Seats. It's a car seat safety organization that I created here in Ypsi. It's gonna be in my manual parenthood book too, because I felt like people didn't know enough about car seats and how important it was to actually understand them and their actual safety equipment, and not just pieces of plastic that you put in your car and then you have to strap your baby into, that they're actual safety stuff. And I just hang out around the community, and I do that a lot.
And you were just part of an event recently at the Bridge Community Cafe, right? Where you got to
Yeah,
review
when
the
I did
workshop.
my book release, it was November 13th, which is World Kindness Day.
Mhm.
So I had my release party at Bridge next door, and the owner was nice enough to donate the space to me and allow me to just hang out. We did crafts, we did rainbow crafts and kindness activities, and I had a good turnout. It was a lot of fun. Sold my first 2 books there, so that was it was really cool. I like to attend First Fridays. It's an Ypsi event in the community for people who, like other artists and community members who make things and bake things and, you know, do all kinds of artsy stuff, come together for like a fair. Yeah. Any other questions? It's at the Ypsi Farmers Market, actually, like literally around the corner from here. It's every first Friday.
It's all through downtown,
Lots of different businesses
Yeah.
participating differently.
but it doesn't, is the farmer's market open right now?
No,
Okay. So it
It's
starts in
closed.
April through December. And I think, I can't remember what they do in April. They have themes every month, usually, not every month, but some months.
it's a lot of fun.
June is Pride Month.
September is bees, I think.
September was bees. I got a little bee pin to put in my hair. We were so excited. I love bees.
All right.
Thank you, Jenna.
Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm sure we'll talk more about
Yeah.
some goings on and things that y'all do around town, but next we have Kayla.
Kayla, this is not a great speaker.
No worries.
So
Okay,
pull it to you.
I can. I can also use my teacher voice because I'm an educator when I'm not. So I'm used to like 40 kids because I work in public history and now I work for 826 Michigan. But hi, I'm Kayla. I'm going to tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about the book before I start. I can.
On button is not on.
It's not
Sorry,
on.
Jenna.
I'm
That's
so
okay.
sorry. Okay, can everyone hear me? Okay, wonderful. My name is Kayla. I am a native of Ann Arbor and grew up around this area. My dad went to Lincoln High School way back in the day, and so this has been my home since I was born, and in some ways even before I was born. For the past 7 years, I recently stopped because now I work as an educator with 826 Michigan, but I worked as a public historian. And in that practice, I learned a lot about the history of this area. I learned a lot about the history of my people, but specifically, we come to the table thinking about the history of African Americans as a very linear, bifurcated thing where, we were slaves and then we weren't, and then the Jim Crow era ended, and then Martin Luther King was shot, and then racism was over. Woohoo! And none of that is true. And we have these interweaving stories of history of the small people who lived everyday lives, but impacted their world in many different ways. And that was one of the things that inspired this book, These Bones. The other really big thing that inspired it was a drive I took from Ypsi to Adrian, which if you've ever tried to drive from here to Jackson County and all the way out in the boonies out there, you'll start on 23, head south, and then it'll just take you to the middle of nowhere. And all of a sudden there's just fields and trees and cows. And at this particular corner, I never remember what streets it was, but there was a abandoned church there. It was sticking out from the woods, kind of this gray mass coming that had trees growing out of it and all of these green leaves. It was the beginning of spring, so they were just budding. And I sat there in my car as I made that turn thinking to myself, I wonder who are the people who sat in that congregation every day. I wonder who the pastor of that church was. I wonder who worshiped there, who got married there, who had their funerals there, who baptized their children there. What were their stories? Because the lives that they lived are now being covered by nature, being destroyed, and in some ways repurposed by the earth itself. And it reminded me of a story I had heard on NPR for StoryCorps about this African-American neighborhood that was segregated from the rest of this town, and how they had built this community up. We often talk about segregation, and I think rightly so, as negative, but in that segregated space, we were able to create our own communities. We were able to create our own lives. And the man telling the story talked about how when integration came to their state and the school district was forced to integrate, what the town fathers decided to do was close down the factory that most of the African Americans were employed at. And so slowly but surely, the African Americans had to leave and their town died and it got bulldozed over. And he said, sometimes I'll still drive it through the town I grew up in, and, it's integrated now and all of these things are, it's better for society that this happened, but all of the stories, all of the memories of our place are gone. And that really resonated with me. And as I saw that abandoned church, I imagined this story and it came out of there. If you read These Bones, or if you've read it, there are multiple voices and telling their own version of their story. At the center of it is this town, which is called Napoleonville, and the segregated section of this town is called the Bramble Patch by the people who live there. In case you didn't know, as a historian, I also love mythology. So Bramble Patch, Brer Rabbit. You'll meet different characters throughout this journey at various points in their life, how they change and grow. And I give you this preface with the part I'm going to read, which is from a book within the book called The Autobiography of the Rhythm and Blues by a woman named Cleo Cook. And in this section, she meets a character who you've been introduced to when he was a boy. You'll meet him again when he's a teenager. But in this section, he's an old man reminiscing about what the town was at its peak. From the autobiography of the Rhythm and Blues by Cleo Cook, 1972, Chapter 8, Black Magic Woman. I turned the Nova down along a dirt road that twisted like the metal frame of a car wreck. The radio was hovering over words and snippets of music, and then would return to the crackle of the static. It was good for my headache. The night before, I had ended up at a pool hall. Folks would see me and say, "You're not from these parts." I'd tell them about my little book, the men I'd interviewed, all the places I'd stopped. A couple of the old timers told me I needed to go to this place called the Crooked Nailhead and talk to a man named Bob White Teller. My heart raced at the name. I remembered it from the faded blue label on my dad's record. I told them thanks and then slammed back a few bourbon rickies because it's hot down here. In the back of the station wagon, I caught a glimpse of my favorite pair of boots, the vinyl crinkled up and more than a little sweaty on the inside. The shoes reminded me of last night's mistakes. A blister grew under the canvas of my chucks, and the remnants of my hangover drummed inside my head. As darkness fell, gravel kicked up and flipped at the windshield. Fireflies lit up strips along the highway like I was landing a plane. A couple of times I stopped for the haunted hollow eyes of deer galloping ahead of me. The disc jockey turned on Black Magic Woman, my ex's favorite song. I tapped my finger on the steering wheel, and there it was, a shack pulsating with light and music. The Crooked Nailhead was the kind of roadhouse where they still throw peanut shells on the floor, and you can get cheap beer in a frosted glass and a cup of ice chips to throw down your back. As I dragged my recorder into the place, I saw I was the only white face in the sea of black ones. The blue plate special for the night was fried catfish, cornbread, and greens. All the tables had been moved to one side to make way for the dancing. There wasn't much of it, though. There I was with my tape recorder and my pen and my paper looking like a schmuck. Up on a set of risers was Tommy Bob White Teller, whose frail body seemed to barely hold up his dobro as he played "Let's Get Drunk Again." I muttered to myself, let's not. The old man wore a bowler. He would later tell me there was an old pimp back home who wore one of these. When we were kids, we used to want to go to his place to buy a night with one of his girls. Got it in my head that that's what you wear when you're rich. I never got rich, but I still dress like it. He moved his fingers across the guitar's neck as though caressing an old love. He picked at each string as though listening for its story. He played with the cigars stuck between his teeth that seemed bigger than his head. Bob White tells a good story with his body. When he finished playing the song, he walked off the stage to a little stool and drank a Seagram 7 on ice. He propped up the guitar on the bar top, and I could see him shaking as sweat poured over his thick lens glasses. I walked over and introduced myself, told him I used to listen to his singles until the grooves went bleary. The bartender handed him a plate of catfish and sort of shrugged his shoulders. I get tips, fish, shit else these days, he said. Where'd you learn how to play like that? I asked. Bob White smiled in such a sad, crooked way that I didn't understand the belly laugh that followed. At Tempest Place, he said. Tempest Place? What did that name mean? The place didn't have a name. It didn't need one. Then who was Tempest? Tempest was tall and dark and swayed into the room like cattails on a breeze. She wore pants and riding boots and a tie. She smelled like pine tar. When she kissed you, you would close your eyes and find yourself in the embrace of the undergrowth. When I think of Tempest, I think of laughter sprinting from her big red lips and the stark white girl who trailed her skirt. He placed the ice cold glass against his forehead and let the condensation roll down his face for a moment. The folds and wrinkles in his face said, I miss the high of something sweeter now. He threw himself back into his chair and threw back the rest of the Seagrams. Shit, girl, you must be a long way from home. Where you from again? What can you say to a legend like Bob White Teller? Do I say Brooklyn or that I studied at Vassar? Do I tell him about the shtetl my great-grandmother grew up in or the summer place in the Catskills? Or do I tell him about the room with the record player in the brownstone where my father would pull vinyls down from a shelf so high I couldn't see it and say, now this one, Cleo, this is a classic. Then the needle would touch the grooves and the hum and crackle would begin as he crumpled into his rocking chair. But Bob White Teller moved on. I'd bike down to her place with my fiddle, cross the bridge from the bramble patch. There'd be the river folk on the other side, and a shanty made of tin and cardboard on a dirt patch. It'd be me and my best friend. He was the piano and I was the fiddle. We'd hightail it in there because we were always late, between schoolwork and church and chorin' and seeing the barges girly strow. Couldn't make it on time. But Tempest, she didn't care. She was usually a little drunk, go up to everyone and give them a hug, even our late asses. Once we start playing, the place was shaking and dancing. That's when Tempest starts dancing and kissing on folk, men, women, it never mattered. She had her little girl with her, white like spider silk. We called her Moonchild. I got to asking where Tempest got a white baby from. She just laughed. All she ever did was laugh at anything. Joy, sorrow, pain, hate. A white lover, she said, from Jericho. She laugh again and say, I seen him, and something came tumbling down, but it weren't a wall. What happened to it, Tempest Place? Prohibition took the booze away, the depression turned the songs to sorrow, then a flood swallowed up the shack and Tempest too. You can't know what the river hides and not expect to tempt fate. A lot of things collapsed after the depression. Not the barges, the old pimp stayed moneyed. Well, the oldest profession and all that, I noted. He looked up at me with squinting concern. He muttered something about his damn cigarettes. As he clawed into his pocket, I couldn't help but think about my dad holding up the Bob White Teller 45s wrapped in fading paper. My dad leaning over me, smiling with a cigarette in his hand. I was really young. My mother had not died long before. My aunt was finishing Shabbat dinner. Ash fell from my dad's mouth as he said, this right here, it's like a diamond, Cleo, a diamond in an effing coal mine. I handed Bob White one of the cigarettes from my pack. He smiled and continued. Me and my best friend, we'd play anything we could think of. Spirituals, marches, hillbilly music, songs we heard the old timers sing, always in a ragtime style like. My favorite was this old song, Darling Cora. His voice warbles and warps, but finds the right tune as he sings. You don't want to hear me sing, so I'm just going to read what he sings. Child, dig a hole in the meadow, dig a hole in the cold, cold crown. Child, dig a hole in the meadow, gotta lay my sweet Cora down. I smiled a bit. For the record, based on the things he's told me, there's no chance in hell he was singing that song in 1921. The earliest known appearance of the song was in 1919, but he is nearing 70, and the years of hard heroin use haunt his fingers. Was this your hometown, the Bramble Patch? He asked as he lit a cigarette. Bramble folk didn't like to think of river folk as belonging to us. Bramble folk? I asked. For some reason, I felt uneasy. From the Bramble Patch, he explained. It's been gone a long while. That's my home. Do you ever? He looks me dead in the eyes as tears start to form in his. You ever see the sulfurous smoke of hell, Miss Cook? How it rises in black billows and consumes everything? I have. That pimp had a crooked, evil smile and blue black smoke from his nose. He come to Tempest Place once. She was getting better business than him. He was coming down there to scream at her. He told her, how you gonna take my folks? How you gonna take my customers when you ain't but river folk? And she called him a bitch. She said, ain't you a little bitch? He raised his hand to slap her, but she spoke and the wind thundered in the pines. Her voice moved the river. The waves crashed against the barges. We stopped the music. Silence. The waves scattered into his face. His suspenders slashed in the wake of her curse. Yes, the barges was made ugly and bullish. Where that little bitch belonged, his bones shuddered. And we heard him rattle. Tempest said, get the F out of my place. I was ordering a second round for myself by this point. He's got to be pulling my leg. Our eyes met. I searched for a wink in their shine, but there was no wink. There was no shine, only quiet, which was broken after the catfish was gone and the tumbler was empty, when the great Bob White Teller began picking at the remnants of his cornbread. The old pimp stared me down, I swear. Me and my best friend, the smoke and sludge of hell he took with him back across the river. Fire belched from his footsteps, him fire, her water. Nothing could stop either of them. They moved through our world and we let them, but they made us, they sustained us until they didn't. And then they swallowed us whole. What happened? I asked. We were leaned in so far close. Come on, Miss Cook, you're smart. There's always fire, water and fire, soul and bone. My best friend and me, the holy and the wicked, the Bramble Patch in Napoleonville. He put his hand over mine and his voice dropped to a Ceresus timbre. There's the skin and sinew. There's this second and the next. And between those, there is a long stretch of breath and stillness and potential. So to answer your first question, that's where I learned to play music. And I'm going to stop us there.
Bramble Path, okay. So thank you all for reading and sharing. Darius is gonna be, I'm gonna probably just be the awkward one going back and forth, looking toward you and the front, so. Thank you both for reading and sharing, your work. I have a few questions, and also we'll have time too, if the audience has questions, you can think about them as well. So when I was invited to join you all, and looking at the description for tonight, it talks about us bringing together young Black writers. And I always think about the ways that like our identities show up in our work and what comes first, right? Is it just, we're just people and then our work comes forth, or how we bring that into our work? So I'm just interested in hearing you talk about, how does your Blackness show up in your writing? How does your youth show up in your writing?
This is gonna sound weird, maybe.
Yeah, I'll put this to, I want to make sure you.
And I don't know if this applies, but this is how my brain is telling me to answer this question. I wrote, "What is kindness?" because my upbringing was both very privileged as a young mixed child with a white mother in a white environment. And also I feel disadvantageous, if I'm saying that word right, because I missed out on a lot of the social cues that my other mixed or Black peers got growing up in Black households. So I had this idea of the world that people weren't mean and cruel and did terrible acts against other humans because they were racist or because they were xenophobic or they had some other prejudice against a person. I just thought they did it because they were mean and they weren't kind people. So growing up, I always just viewed that if you're a mean person and you're doing mean things, then you're not kind. I didn't have, I guess, a privilege of viewing it as somebody from a racist standpoint. So until I was a young adult, I mean, I guess I kind of am a young adult, but like my early 20s, that was how I viewed the world. And until I started witnessing on the news and in the things that I was reading when I went to college, that these were actually acts of cruelty and racism, my world just suddenly shifted. And it wasn't about people being mean. It was just about people being kind, and being inclusive and recognizing other people, not because of how they're out here in the world, but because of the things that they're saying, the actions that they're taking. So that was the core inspiration for my book. And I feel like that's where my writing comes out, is that idea that everybody just needs to be kind, I guess, if that made any sense and answered your question at all.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Darius, do you want to go or do you want me to go?
I feel like put on the spot, everybody turn their heads, and so like if I say no, then everybody has to turn around and go back to. I'm down to go real quick. To name one, I don't identify as Black. I identify as New African. This is an understanding that it's a lot. It's attached to my politics, and so it's interesting the question around like how our identities show up, because my identity is so political and so attached to a belief. And so the New African Independence Movement has deep roots in Detroit. I don't know how many folks are aware and familiar, but essentially the Black Liberation Movement left what it left after loads of state repression and resistance and COINTELPRO and all out struggles and war internationally and nationally. And folks arrived at and understanding an idea, folks that were in the Black Arts Movement, for former Panthers, folks that only had their organizing bearings in the Civil Rights Movement, all came together to an understanding that this existence that we have as Black folks in the US is a colony and a colonized relationship. The United States is a settler colony, and its relationship to Africans, to Black folks, has always been colonial. And so New African and the New African Independence Movement is an understanding of that very particular relationship between Black folks and this settler colony, and the necessity of separating ourselves, and understanding that we're not in a centuries-long struggle to be included, but instead we're in a centuries-long struggle actually to just self-actualize, right? And because of that struggle, we are being denied our right to nationhood, self-determination, and living a free life. And so just to name that shows up in my writing, in my relentless critique and laying out of our situation. For me, what transformed my understanding was just, there's a lot of things happening online right now with there's like the last one I saw was like New Orleans, and I forget which African country the dance is in relationship to, but it's like a side-by-side of these Black American quote unquote dances and their similarity to African dances. And for me, a huge point was understanding that we never stopped being African. There are folks that acknowledge we can call ourselves African American, and so it's always been a part of our identity. But like I said, for me, my identity, that Blackness, New Africanness, which isn't to say like Blackness doesn't exist. I'm not down in Blackness. I recognize like that is its own political identity that has its roots in how it came to our collective psyche and being used. And I recognize that it's about time we stop playing around with this thing and go on and get free. And if we look at freedom in terms of a historical approach, the folks who have successfully transformed a capitalist society into a free society, i.e. socialist, have done so through revolutionary nationalism, and having a national identity. And part of what trips us up is we call ourselves Black Americans, attach ourselves to the destiny of the United States. And so integration is the best we can do, the highest seat in the country, and then things will change, just more Black cops, more Black mayors, but it's all a fallacy. But yeah, I think that shows up pretty clearly in my work. And it's a responsibility and duty in terms of just like raising consciousness and heightening a contradiction between a collective of people that are, we are like hit with waves of our genocide and death and oppression. And so it's important that we understand the power in that, and that it's not just a one-sided, and doesn't have to be a one-sided thing. To the person I was talking about history earlier, I think that's a very particular part of history that we don't ever have access to. And today is MLK Day. You think about the latter part of his life, where he ended his life, where he was going, and that being non-referenced and hidden and shifted, let alone his actual work. That COINTELPRO had a hand in demonizing while he was around. So my very roundabout way of answering that question.
Well, thank you.
I will say that for me, when I think about that question, I realize that like I am a writer in the same way I am a reader, and I absorb the things I absorb in that way. And as a young person, I was starving for stories that were where I saw myself, and I could find them in glimpses, but often they were centered on the pain of being Black. And I think that when I was a young kid and I was like, I'm going to be the first 9-year-old to be published, and I'm writing things, I would tend to shift away from my own identity, because every book that I had read thus far that talked about my identity was about the pain aspects. It's, here's a slavery narrative for a 4-year-old. Here is a story about 1919 Red Summer in Chicago for a 7-year-old. But as I grew into myself and I grew as a reader, I began to find stories that spoke to my identity, and that began to leak into my writing. And suddenly I wasn't afraid to talk about my identity because I realized like, oh, I can tell my experiences that aren't always marred with pain are just as valid as the stories I am reading as a child and then as a teenager and now as a young adult. So yeah, I think that's my answer to that question.
Yeah, no, thank you. Let's see here, I'm trying to think about the order. So another thing that I always think about is often, right, you're putting out a piece of work and it's you kind of holding that out, right? But that we always know that there's so many other folks that are helping us to be in that space. And so just want to give space to for you to be able to talk about kind of who supported you to find or to live in your power, right? Like as an artist, as a writer, as a sharer, as a person just trying to put your point of view out.
Okay.
I'm just looking around and kind of, whoever else.
But you both looked at me. I can say with absolute certainty that I have a force behind me, a force of supportive family and friends who have always told me that I'm capable of great things, that I have a voice that other people want to hear, that I have stories that other people are interested in listening to. And especially my grandmother, who was integral in my raising, really helped me to understand that that my talent, I guess if I could call it that, for writing and for reading deserved to be out in the world, and that there wasn't money that was going to stop it from happening. There wasn't a lack of resources that were going to stop it from happening. That I would have the support of her and my other family, my mom, my partners, my children, who would all band together and support and love and encourage me. And I've had that from jump. I started out writing as a fan fiction writer. If you know what that is, please don't talk about it. And I had a lot of people who were like, oh my God, I love the way you write. I love listening to your stories. I love reading it. You're so in depth. And I want, more than just stealing characters and writing about them. People really enjoyed the way that I wrote and my flow and the way that I brought those characters that weren't mine to life in my own way. And eventually I would love to expand on that. But I started knowing that I wanted to show my children that it's possible to be in the situation that we're at and still be successful. That you can define your own success, that it's not defined by anybody else. And, other people might look at my situation and be like, is that really successful? I'm like, I wrote a whole book. If that's not success, I don't know what is. So, and my family has always had my back. They're actually watching right now. Hi, Sam. Hi, Grace. Hi, Grandma. Hi, Mama. Hi, Uncle Joe. And I'm really grateful to have their support. And I'm really grateful that they encouraged me to pursue this. And without them, I definitely wouldn't have thought that I was capable or that my words were worth sharing with you guys. So thanks to them.
Okay, I will go next just so that Darius does not feel like uncomfortable with me like turning and being like, it's your turn.
Ruining the flow.
Yeah. Okay. Very similarly to Jenna, I have been very fortunate to have a support system in my family that has always encouraged me to cultivate my voice, that always looked at me and said, you have a gift with words. continue to hone it. And when I was like 4 years old and I wrote a story about a puppy, my grandmother, my mom, my dad, my stepfather, they would sit down and be like, yeah, like, this is great. This is a great 4-year-old story about a puppy. In this, I also just really want to take the time to like acknowledge the educators in my life who actively took the time to tell me that I had a voice that would deserve to be heard, because every student does have a voice that deserves to be heard. And I was a very discouraged writer when I was younger, until my 6th grade English teacher told me, you're a pretty good writer, Kayla. And it opened up my world. My brain completely blossomed. And I felt really free. And I've had so many educators along my life path that have been there for me. In this book in particular, and very similarly to Jenna, because this person's on the stream, I did want to say that my partner with this book in particular read every single draft I ever drafted. God bless him. And God bless him as well, because I know I asked him many inane questions like, okay, but this particular sentence in this particular paragraph makes sense, or should I switch it around? And he gave me excellent feedback for every single draft until I felt confident enough to send it to a publisher. And then even after that, he read every single draft except for the final draft when it was in book form. But it was really rewarding to have a partner it's really rewarding to have a partner who's willing to support that dream, and also like do the work part of supporting that dream too, which is yes, I will read every draft of your books. So thank you, because I know you're watching.
That's committed.
So many people. I thought I always go back to my 4th grade English teacher, or teacher. I feel like, yeah, back then subjects weren't separated, so it was just the 4th grade teacher, who like brought my mom in after a poetry unit and like pointed to the fact that there was something special, or that something she recognized as special in the writing of it. And then from there, my mama, when I was a rebellious teenager that was anti-everything, my mother still pushed past and was encouraging of all that, even though I was trying to be at odds on every level of our relationship. And so, yeah, she took me to my first slam, which was, for folks who don't know, it's a competitive poetry competition. People go up, they say their words, they get a score. But none of that mattered. I didn't hear anything about the scores. It was just my first time seeing poetry performed for the first time. And I was bawling, just like face soaked after each performer. And I had no idea what was happening to me. And I was like, oh, I want to do that to people. I want to try that out. And my mother was really supportive in the things after that moment, and like constantly encouraging me to get on stage, and to like providing avenues for me to perform, even, and things she heard about. To this day, you know, still one of my biggest supporters. Yeah, I think with this last book, I gotta also shout out my dear friend Imani Cezanne. I was in the last year of my program trying to write a packet of poems to turn in, and I was disinterested. I absolutely hated the program because it just wasn't. It had such a detachment from material reality and everything that was going on. Like my first semester there, one of our first classes, Trump was elected, and we just kind of like mentioned it at the top of the class, and then had class, you know. And I was like, oh, this is like. And so like for the rest of the program, I realized just like a separation between what was happening outside and what we were doing there, which is the nature of academies and all kinds of other communities where we like start to prop ourselves up. But my friend was like a really dope catcher's mitt, I guess I could say. So when I was like, fuck this class, she had an interest in reading books, poetry books, an interest in editing poems, an interest in critique and feedback in a way that was grounding, and what it didn't feel like it had no application to reality. And so for this book, similarly to what other folks said, she read every poem in this book. Much of the poems in the book are due to her initial feedback. There was an editor for the process of the bookmaking with the publisher. But before there was a draft, before there was even a handful of poems, there was Imani Cezanne leaving notes in a Google Doc with me. So always gotta shout her out. And I think, yeah, those are the things that I think about in terms of feeling supported to push these things into the world.
I'd like to say, Darius, I'm wearing makeup. It's the only reason I didn't cry at like 2 of your poems that you read tonight. So thank you. You have succeeded.
So my next question, thinking about, today, MLK Day, celebrating his birthday, but also his life and everything that happened in that time. And so thinking about him and his role when thinking about revolution, which I know you do a lot, Darius, and then also social justice and thinking about writing as a tool for these things, and how that shows up and why this is the way that you have found to show up in this space and to put your work forward. So maybe we can start with you first, Darius. Just to kind of change the flow up a little bit.
So I was looking forward to, I started to sit back you and I was like, okay, I got some time. Nope. Well, can you restate the question? I heard the general theme, but is there
I guess it is just a theme question. So just in terms of thinking about how you see or why you chose writing as a tool for thinking about justice, social justice, revolution.
For sure. I'm trying to be less long-winded than the other questions, but the first thing that comes to mind is a quote by a poet named Dennis Brutus. He was a South African anti-apartheid poet. And he said, I don't think, it was in an interview, he said there was a question about commitment, like poets being committed people in terms of political commitments. And he said, I don't think that the poets have any more responsibility than to be committed than anyone else. I think that commitment is for everybody, and the poet is just one of the many everybody's. And I think that's something that stands out. So when I think about my relationship or why poetry, so it just so happens I'm a poet, I just so happen to be writing, and the responsibility does not necessarily come from an experience for me where I was like, oh yeah, poetry that's the way and the tool. Because sometimes it's not, there are some spaces where, I'm trying to organize or trying to do political conversations, whatever, what have you, and poetry just isn't the way. And so, yeah, I'll say that first. And then I also think about art's power and how, for me, what I call the opposition, which is oppressors, all the folks that are facilitating the realities that we have all talked about or talked around here, Black folks suffering, splitting up of families, slavery, all those things that have naturally come up. The folks that facilitate that reality is opposition to me. And so they're very aware of the power of art. You look at the CIA's investment in writing workshops, in particular with the Iowa Writers Workshop. You look at the federal government's investment in cop shows, which propaganda. You look at there was one more example. Oh, the military's relationship to the movies that we watch, and the retelling of murderous and genocidal military actions in a way that favors and humanizes these folks. You look at all of that and you see that the state, the oppressors, are very aware of the power of art. And so too, at some point we were, but I also recognize that a tool is only as good as the person wielding it. And in terms of art, in terms of community, that means that a collective consciousness, a collective movement has to be built and has to be wielded, because until then I'm just a wild man talking about revolution, in a corner. And so about the effectiveness of art, I think that it has a power to propagandize. After this book dropped, there are folks, somebody left a review that said, oh, I didn't know pro-Palestinian books could get published. There's another person that was like, oh, I didn't know these perspectives existed in poetry. And I think back to, again, coming back to the histories we're not taught. We know nothing about, you know, the Black arts movement besides like this cursory, oh, it was some cultural workers who were doing some jazz poems, if we know that, right? But these were folks that were politically committed, you know. Amiri Baraka, part of the New African Independence Movement, founding the Republic of New Africa. Sonia Sanchez, you know, we like to talk about Sonia Sanchez poetry, but she was getting down with the Breakfast Program. You know, she was along with the Panthers. And so anyway, all I have to say, I think that that writing is most effective when there are a people wielding it, when there's a collective consciousness of the purpose and intention, and when it's speaking to, as Emory Douglas might say, the reality and hopes and dreams of people. I guess the last thing I will end on is what Emory Douglas says about the revolutionary artist, and that, like, if there is a revolutionary artist, our responsibility is political clarity, ideological clarity, and to be next to, alongside, speaking to the experience, the reality of the masses, of oppressed folks, and showing them that the opposition is mortal. You know, that capitalism was not inevitable, that white supremacy is not inevitable, that these are just people making decisions, and we on the other side can make our own decisions too, for a changed reality.
Thank you.
Okay, I will go. When you asked this question, the first thing I thought of is this essay that the novelist Madeleine L'Engle wrote called Icons of the True, where she says the responsibility of the writer, this is a paraphrase, but the responsibility of the writer is to hold up, like, similarly to a religious icon of the truth. It is not necessarily going to be fact itself, but it is a way in which you can see fact and recognize it in front of yourself. But I think similarly, art can only be revolutionary, writing can only be revolutionary if it's working in action with other revolutionary acts. I can say the truth, but it can only get so far. It has to be aligned with other people's work. It has to be aligned with other people being in the community. It has to be aligned with all of these things. And if what I write inspires that, that's great. But the writer can only be one arm of a multi-armed revolutionary act towards justice. So yeah, that's my thought.
Thank you. Yay. Where's my snack?
You have to see me cry.
Well, you didn't send any for us to eat while we were doing this. You should have sent it all the way from Oakland, California.
Plan this all as perfectly as we could have.
We want chocolate too. I have a background in early childhood education. Yay, thank you. And even before I was properly educated, I had always, I don't know, just known, somebody had always been in my ear, I guess, telling me that literacy from an early age was one of the most important weapons you can have when you're out surviving in the world. And so when I wrote what I wrote, which is a lot of things that I wrote, I have a lot of things that I wrote. I always imagined that it was going to be for the younger viewers, the younger readers, to promote that literacy, to make sure that the messages that we wanted to raise our children in were planted as young as possible. You know, the really important ones, the ones about kindness, the ones about inclusivity, the ones about equity and equality. And I do a lot of my writing with the idea that parents are going to be reading these to their children, and the parents are going to internalize my writing, and the children are going to listen to the words and familiarize themselves with the vocabulary, and they're going to grow up listening to it, and then they'll be able to form and be curious about their own ideas, and write and listen to the things that resonate with them. And I feel like that's integral. especially when you're young and you're Black, when your mom just doesn't have the time or the energy or the space or the capacity to sit down and read a book to you. Having the ability to do that on your own and having somebody to, I don't know, anybody to read to you, having books to read as a small, young Black child that, you know, the character looks like you or you resonate with their story. Those are just really, really important. And we can't change the world unless we have those representatives in the world.
Thank you. All right, so this next question is coming from the fact that I'm an older millennial. And so that's the phrasing of the question might be coming from that space, because I remember when millennial used to just mean young. And now I'm like 40, so yeah, so so now I don't think that's the case anymore. So this question is, what do you want folks to remember about your writing or your characters when you can no longer get by being called young anymore?
I'll start.
Go ahead.
Okay.
Yes, thank you.
We're shaking up the order again. The thing that I've always, with this book, and I think with everything that I, you know, when I was a 10-year-old writing again about puppies, I always wanted to leave a legacy of resilience. In this book in particular, though, one of the overarching themes is that things endure despite all obstacles to tear them down. The title of the book comes from the old spiritual, "These Bones Gonna Rise Again." And this idea that like, there will always be a way in which you can keep moving forward. And as I'm saying this, I'm realizing, if you can see, I have a lot of tattoos, and I realize, like, for me, a lot of the tattoos that I have are that same theme of just, even when the world has like grabbed you and pulled you down to the lowest point, the bones will rise again, and it might look different. It might not be the same people. It might not be the same place. It might be, you know, it might be that the tree is growing metaphorically out of this abandoned church, but it's still a sanctuary, you know, it's still a hallowed place. So those bones are rising again. And that, I think, has been the resonance with this book that I have wrote. And I realize now that my work that I'm working on now has that same theme. So yeah.
Can you rephrase that question? Because I'm thinking about it and I don't know if I have an answer that makes sense out in the real world.
Well, I guess it's just thinking about that sometimes I think about, like, you reflect back, like, you know, you think back to like all of the, you know, what has happened, and you kind of have like a perspective in that way. And I'm guessing, I'm just thinking about like how to project forward in terms of what you would take with you forward, of the kind of your writing now that you would want people to take forward with them as they are reading your work.
When I'm not young anymore, I want people to read my writing, and this is going to sound really corny because I wrote a book about kindness. I want people to read my work and be kind. I want people to internalize my writing and just remember, oh yeah, that was that writer who wrote about kindness, and what am I doing to be kind? What am I thinking about today? How is my expectations, how is the society's expectations of me to be nice different than me genuinely from the heart wanting to be kind? And that's all I want, is for people to read any of my stories, even the manual that is out, you know, in limbo land right now. I'm going to write that with kindness, and I want people to read that with kindness, and I want people to think about parenting and being in relationships and being a daughter and being a son and being a child and a sibling being an acquaintance and a friend with kindness. And that's all I want, is just kindness.
I want my daughter to talk to me with a little bit more kindness.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let me
Listen.
get my 6-year-old to.
Gentle parenting sometimes doesn't come with gentle children, okay? It's hard.
Yes.
It's
Yeah.
not. You just have to just be it and embody it and be okay with not being reciprocated.
First of all, I just want to say I feel attacked by this question. You're no longer young. How will you be remembered? Like, wait, I'm still alive. Hopefully. Nah, I just turned 30, so I'm very much feeling like I'm exiting young, or have already exited, depending on who you ask. And I think if there is someone that is looking at me in the future and then looks back to young, I hope they see a development and trajectory that makes sense, which is to say maybe just see the humanity of this life thing I'm trying to do, and in that also see some, a bit of humanity for themselves. I think so often it feels like every question comes back to a spiel, but like we get bogged down into holding on to pieces of folks. And so again, coming back to the fact that today is Martin Luther King Day, harping on our unhealthy relationships to history, and just how the reality is, folks go along journeys, and sometimes they do like this. Some folks are like, I started here, ended up there. But whatever the case, I hope that folks can see that I'm, moving towards things not in an independent, individualized way, but that I've gotten to wherever I am or wherever I was through very particular, stimuli and experiences and communities and realities that have had a really important impact on me. And so I think humanity is the word that stands out. I hope folks see the humanity of it all, and then again see the humanity in themselves through that journey in a positive way.
Thank you. So before I ask my other questions, I wanted to see if there's questions in the audience, or things that you all want to pose to our authors. So just want to give a space in case there's stuff. You have something? Yes, come on. Do we use this? So
Yeah, go ahead.
I have a question about how did you write the book?
Me? How did I write kindness? Well, I was at work one day. Don't do this, it's not okay. I was at work one day, and we were closing. It was the end of the day. I had like one kid, and I opened my phone and I turned on the app, Google Docs, and I wrote words. I wrote words. I was like, what is kindness? And then in the words that I wrote, I was like, well, if I was reading this to my child, if I was reading this to a child your age, I thought, how would I explain this to them? And I literally wrote it out in conversation form, like us having a discussion now. And I had my best friend look over it, and she was like, this is how you can make it look like a book. And she helped me do that. But, it's just, you just put pen to paper, you just put your fingers to the keyboard, and you just write it.
So I've been making books in school with paper.
You did?
It's my 16th book.
Your 16th book?
Yeah.
Wow, can I read them? I want to read them.
It's Egyptian kid. It's not really that inappropriate.
I'm sure it's marvelous.
It's a kind of funny for the kids. I just made them funny, but I just make them so like I make the book and then I make them for each kid in my class, and then I literally give them it, and then they just draw something, and then they just draw a little emoji, and I'm like, why did they draw that? It's their book, and I'm like, why do you not want it?
They were inspired by your words to draw.
Yeah.
That's what it
I
sounds
only
like to
was
me.
drawing, and I was only drawing speech bubbles, but not really words that much.
It sounds like you wrote a book. You know how to write. You wrote 16. I wrote 1.
Yeah,
And you
that's
wrote
You wrote
16.
more than that.
Okay, in real life, I have 2 books that I have fully written. Only one is actually published. The other one has yet to be illustrated. So I wrote 2 fully complete books, but you wrote 16 books.
that's very
It
impressive.
sounds like you already
Yeah.
know
It's
how to
like-
write.
The pages are like this thick.
Wow.
I'm not ever writing a book that thick, so that's amazing. That's amazing. You already know how. You know what
Anybody
to
else?
say?
It could be questions for individual authors or like group questions.
Question. I'm trying to phrase it in my head so hopefully it comes out. This is more about the role of the artist, especially as art programs are getting cut, as we know, right? It's less and less investment into the power of creation in that way. And yet we know how powerful it is. And so I'm just curious, like, as you are an artist and you're creating these works, where do you see your role in not just creating works, but continuing the tradition of the creation in others?
Mm.
Can you answer? I think everything that we do as humans is a creation. And everything that we do in school, even though math seems really rudimentary, you're still creating something. And I can say for myself as an educator, specifically, maybe this is not, clearly this isn't in every classroom, but in my classrooms, as I was teaching and my children were learning, it was evident that they were learning the things that they created with their hands. So like introducing art projects like coloring and, you know, painting and even I had these little like letter stickers. They're 1. They don't really know the letter I, but they were like taking the little stickers off and putting it on paper and making their own little words up. And through that, my children really, by the end of the year, by the end of that program, they could identify, you know, this is the letter I put that there. I means me. And I don't know if that fully, even remotely, actually answers your question, but I feel like it's my responsibility as an educator and as a parent, as a community member, to make sure that anything that a child or another person is learning from me gives them the space to create whatever it is that they want to learn and create. They go hand in hand for me.
Can I piggyback off of what you just said?
Please.
Okay. I think that as we move forward as writers, I think one of our obligations is to invite young people that are younger than us, into the community of writers. So we have a very prolific author sitting right over there. She is a part of the community of writers that is also a part of everything. So no matter what a student, how the student expresses their art, whether it is writing fan fiction or writing poetry or writing stories about puppies or writing books for their friends, they are a writer. And I think a lot of times we put a lot of emphasis on publishing a book. Like, you're a writer when this is here, but you're a writer the minute you put your ideas down in written form. And I think the more we tell young people that they are writers the second their ideas are written down, the more encouraged they will be to continue their craft and continue moving forward.
I suffered from imposter syndrome bad until this was done. Until I had this version of this book in my hand. I was like, I'm not a writer. I'm not an author.
Yeah.
I'm not real. I'm fake. I wasn't fake. I was as real as it was gonna get. Like,
Yeah.
even if nobody saw my book, you know, for me,
I don't know who or what or when, how you supposed to thinking very much about what is kindness.
Like, I know, maybe everybody knows what is Skype, blah, blah, but more like only say, like introduce and this, like deepest and deep for like kind of.
How to say this? So, to me, I had always viewed the word nice and the word kind as two sides of a very similar coin. I don't know if it's the same coin, but I just got really tired of hearing people say, you gotta be nice, don't forget to play nice. Like that, I feel like that's putting expectations on a child. Like I have to go out in society and I have to perform a certain way. People are expecting these things of me. It's nice to hold the door open because that's what it's expected. It's nice to, you know, help an old woman across the street because that's what's expected. But that felt so fake and that felt so heartless almost. Like I'm only doing this because, you know, it's expected of me and I have to, and I don't feel like a sense of genuine desire to help you or to be here for you in this moment. And so I promised myself that I was never going to tell my children to be kind or to be nice. And I was going to teach them that there was a difference between being nice and being kind, and kindness comes from your heart. Kindness comes from sincerity, right? So kindness, being kind and being nice were different. And I just felt this intense need to write a book that portrayed that, so that I could share that with my kids without having to like sit down and have a conversation. Like, this is kindness and this is niceness. Like, this is how you exemplify kindness. And if they had any questions, they could answer for, you know, they could ask me and I could answer, but I didn't want it to just be a lesson that they didn't remember, that it was in their subconscious. I wanted it to be something upfront in their minds that they remembered. My mom wrote a book about kindness, and that's not an excuse to just walk around the world and be nice. And I don't want my kids to, you know, feel obligated to do anything for anybody, for any reason other than they really genuinely want to. And that's what kindness is for me. And that's why I focus so much on this. This is why I wanted this to be my first book. Thank you for your question.
Any other questions from the audience?
Yeah, so this is Aaron, just so Darius can hear me from off screen. Part of why I brought all y'all together was also that you're all centered in different kinds of community. So Jenna works with Care Seats of Michigan, focused on low-income families in need and addressing car seat issues. Kayla comes from a history background. And so again, it's bringing in multiple generations, which is, you know, I brought in a showcase of younger authors, but that doesn't mean we aren't paying respects to history and to our elders that brought us to where we are now, right? And Darius, though he's across the country, has some roots in the Midwest, and has connected to a whole new kind of community with a lot of the people's program work that he is doing out in Oakland, and working with Tongo Eisen Martin, who he mentioned earlier. They staged a sit-in at a school that was being shut down not long ago. So I just wanted to hear a bit from each of you about how the kinds of communities that you're centered in right now inform your goals as a writer or as a person in general, you know. So if you could maybe touch on that and talk a bit about the communities that you're centered in right now, if you don't mind.
Okay, I will go.
Why is me looking at you?
I
Indicator that it's me.
think just eye contact has been our indicator for answering questions. So working as a public historian, a lot of my job has been to dispel people's opinions about people's misconceptions and opinions about things that happened in the past. So I will give an example of a real thing that happened in my job when I worked in the city of Detroit, where we got a comment card from a woman who, my friend who is here has heard the story before. I am horribly embarrassed for this woman. where I had seen her at one point angrily talking to the only white employee on the main floor. And I walked up because I didn't know what was going on, and I had higher ranking than this white employee. And I was like, is everything okay, ma'am? Like, just trying to smooth it over. She's like, it's fine. And she stalks out. And I'm like, oh my goodness, I don't know what's going on. And my very gracious employee, she says to me, oh, like the woman is mad that in this museum that is dedicated to the history of Detroit, that there's as much Black history as there is. And she left a comment card, which I can still quote verbatim, and I will try to paraphrase it, but it basically said, where is the real history of Detroit? Where's the like salt mines and all this stuff? I know it's the month of February, but if I wanted to learn about Black history, I would go to the African American Museum.
Wow.
I think about that every day of my life. Every time I create a program, every time I stand in front of a group of students, every time I have to think about, when I sit down to write, I think about that woman who's probably not watching this, or, you know, she's probably long gone. Yeah. But I think about that woman, and I think about what she said, because I feel like as a writer and as a public historian, my job has to be to make sure that in the future, there will not be people who say the real history of something and they mean the white history, or they mean the straight history, or they mean the male history, or they mean the cis history. They need to recognize, everybody needs to recognize, I'm getting really passionate about this, but people need to recognize that like we have always been here. We have always been a part of the stories in this country, that our various ideas have always been a part of the story of this country. Darius brought up the dance comparison thing. I've literally taught lectures about that because I get so upset reading literal textbooks that say things like the Charleston came actually from England in the 1500s. No, it didn't. It came from Black people. It came from brown people. It came from queer people. So for you to erase that history, to me, is egregious. So if I have one thing I can do with my life, it's this. It's making sure that people like know their history. Sorry.
Oh, thank you. Oh, thank you.
Would either of you like to answer that question?
Okay, I just need a minute. Whew, okay, cool. Hey, thank you. Thank you. I don't know how to recover from that. My community. Is that what you asked me about?
Curious to Michigan and other communities that you engage in.
I am gonna tell you that I 100% am that woman who had children, and that became my whole identity. It was just easy to fall into. I wanted to fall into it. It wasn't until I was like, now that I thought about even remotely wanting an identity that was Jenna, because I was so excited to be Sam and Grace's mother, and really deep dive into parenthood and being the best parent that I can be, and raising these little people to be wonderful humans in the world who were, you know, gonna make it. Maybe they weren't gonna change the whole world, but the butterfly effect, they were gonna make a difference in some way, and it was going to be a good difference if I had any say in it. And when I jumped headfirst into that, I mean, I really researched everything: breastfeeding, bottle feeding, the pros and cons of baby wearing, everything except car seat safety, because I had no idea about it. That wasn't in any baby book that I had read. No pediatrician had ever they just asked, do you have a car seat for your child? And I answered yes. And that was it. I think maybe when I was in the delivery room getting ready to leave with my son, I had a CPST, a child passenger safety technician, come up and do a car seat check, asked me if my car seat was good. And that was it. There was no explanation on why she was checking my car seat. There was no explanation on what prompted her to come to me specifically. Like, was this a program that they did for all new moms? Was I special? Like, she didn't give me any information, just came in and checked my car seat and then sent me home. And I look back at some of Sam's baby pictures of us riding in the car together because I was a very conscientious mother, and I would sit in the back with him until he was almost like a year and a half old, until I had my daughter. And the pictures break my heart because his straps are just, he's completely unbuckled basically. Like the chest clip is there and the crotch clip is there, but like he's just like loosey goosey. And I think God every single day, higher power, whatever you believe in, that I didn't get into any sort of major accidents while he was unrestrained basically in the car. And it just seemed to me that when I spoke to other people about this, when it started like appearing on my radar, a lot of like my white mom peers were like, oh yeah, I know about car seat stuff. I know about car seat safety. You strap it in and you have to lock the seatbelt retractor and make sure the chest clip is at the chest armpit level. And like, they all knew what they were talking about and I didn't know anything. But then when I, connected with like my Black mom friends, they were like, what even is the point? Like, they don't even, why am I spending $300 on a car seat anyway? Like, they're going to grow out of it so fast. It's like so unnecessary. And it just really made me wonder, what about this situation wasn't right to me? I couldn't really put my finger on it until I went to my car seat safety class, and they showed me that in the demographics, mostly it was white affluent women who had any sort of question, were concerned, had even like the notion to be concerned about car seat safety. And it was shown that Black women and Black men just weren't aware that it was something that they needed to be concerned about. And I really was wondering why. Like, where was the manual that the white people were reading, or what was the information? Where were the pediatricians that these, white people were getting, to white parents telling them about how important it was for their children to be safe in the car? But where, I was encountering pediatricians and doctors and other women who were like, it's flippant, it's not necessary. And I went down this whole rabbit hole that led me to this book, actually, because like, to me, like early childhood education, being a parent, being a mom, specifically having 2 small children, it all just came to a head in all the same way. And I wanted to be kind to my community members. I wanted them to know that their children were just as important and worthy of being in a safe car seat, and that their financial situation, their poverty, get all worked up too. Their unaccess, their inability to access the resources that I was suddenly had access to, that I was going to change that. I was going to make an effort to make sure that they knew that their children were worth it, because the white women were all like, yeah, my children is worth it, of course, and it makes sense. But like, for some reason, Black women, Black parents are told that it's just like not, and they're told by their parents, they're told by their grandparents, because they don't have the money, they don't have the energy to focus on car seats. They're trying to get from A to B, from work to home, their kids to school. And that's just like the least important thing, when it's really the most important thing. If you're riding in a car, your child should be strapped in properly, and you should know how to use it every single time safely. And I started Care Seats of Michigan with the mission that the women, the men, the parents, the caregivers in my community would have access to the education, even if I couldn't provide a car seat, which is part of my program. I want to provide those car seats to people who can't afford it for whatever reason, X, Y, and Z. You tell me you can't afford it, I'm going to give you a car seat. You don't have to prove it to me. I don't want that to be a barrier. But it was so important to me that I at least get the information out there. And the knowledge that it's important. And I didn't want parents to come to me and just keep saying, oh, it's not, that I can just put my child in a booster seat and it's the same thing. It's like, but it's not, but it's not. The 5-point harness is the most safe you can be rear facing for as long as possible until your child is sick of it, honestly. I mean, sick of it at like 4 years old, asking to be turned around. That's where my passions stand. And that's why I started Care Seats of Michigan. That's why I wrote this book. I know that was really long-winded.
Word. Yeah, I'm thinking about the both y'all's responses in the relationship to the work that Aaron referenced, and just how integral, how like foundational that assertion from white people, white systems, white governments, white teachers, that there is a separate history, that there's a separate experience between an American history and Black American, Black African, New African, whatever term we put on it, that those two things are separate. And I'm thinking about like our willingness or unwillingness to explore that, and just and then also anyway, so I'm gonna go to I am a member of an organization called People's Programs. It's a New African Revolutionary Socialist organization. There's a book, lots of books behind me, called We Are Our Own Liberators. It's written by a former Panther Black Liberation Army veteran named Jalil Muntaqim. In that book, essentially, he draws a connection between our history of struggle here in the United States, his particular involvement with the Black Panther Party, shit before that, NAACP, his upbringing, and today. He was a political prisoner for 49 years. He was released in 2020 and got straight back to work. He was with the Panthers, the Black Liberation Army, continued organizing while in prison, and now is organizing with an organization called PLP, People's Liberation Program, Rochester, New York. His work is foundational to, along with all other, folks who have gotten down for revolution in the name of Black folks, to this organization, People's Programs. And so we're a New African Revolutionary Socialist organization. That means a couple of different things. One, I already laid out this identity of New African. If you're down, if you want to chat more after you're interested, holla at me. I'm on all the socials, first and last name. Also, you can tap into peoplesprograms.com, all kinds of writing and reading lists and things that go further into that. Revolutionary Socialist, and understanding that our reality, the reality that Leah, is that even her name? Lena, the person that wrote the Be Kind book. Sorry.
Jenna.
Oh, me?
Jenna. It was like in my hair. I'm a visual learner. I'm so sorry. I haven't like seen the names. Apologies. Jenna is
Kind of close.
mentioned.
You can't even see us. It's hard.
What Jenna was talking about with this is inequitable access both to information and to resources. That too is an understanding of capitalist exploitation and a reality that we've been subject to since the inception of the United States. There's never been a time where that's not been true, and so we operate towards and inside of practicing socialism. We have decolonization programs. I'm trying to make it short, but also not go in depth and not explain all the things and what they mean. But we operate with an understanding that this system is what is facilitating our reality, white supremacist capitalism in particular, starting with the first ships that stole Africans from the continent. Our relationship has been one of subjugation inside of the so-called United States, and it does not and will not change unless we change it. And so we operate towards and pushing towards away from capitalism and towards socialism, because we also recognize that a Black community that is still operating inside of capitalism is not free or liberated. And so we operate and practice socialism. One way we do that is through organizing decolonization programs. And so we have a free health clinic that goes out with us. We have a program on Sundays where we serve the houseless folks in West Oakland. I don't know how many of y'all have been to California or the Bay specifically, but houselessness is a huge reality, especially for Black folks. We're a small percentage, as again with all facets of society, we represent a small number, in terms of the population, but the highest number for the suffering side of that thing. And so population wise, not a huge part of Oakland, but that's our people as Africans and Black folks that are on the streets. And so we serve them on Sundays with giving out hygiene packs, hot meals. We also do like clothing and other sorts of donations based on the requests that we get. We have a grocery program, same idea. We take out we take out grocery boxes, fresh groceries. What'd you say? Oh, okay. We take out fresh groceries to folks in West Oakland. And a part of that program, that's part of our food sovereignty program. We also have a community farm. And so we build our skills internally. Whoever pulls up our volunteers, our membership, our leadership, and we use the produce that we grow there to fill our boxes, our grocery boxes that we take out with us. So yeah, tap in if you want to talk more about people's programs, if you want to talk more about what is meant by New African and its significance for especially analyzing our reality from a historical materialist, which is like a tangible understanding, social, political, and economic analysis of our reality.
Thank you. I feel like we'll be coming to a close. So, but one thing I was just thinking about is just like quick connections, like in this conversation. One, for Darius, your book, I've been staring at the back here and I see somebody, it's like a small world moment because I know Janae Johnson from my time when I was in Boston and like seeing her work and seeing that she was helping to support your book. So I was like, oh, that's a great little small world connection. And then as you were talking about the car seats, it made me think every week, my daughter is at an early learning center and they're constantly saying reminders about your kid needs to be buckled in before you pull off.
Literally.
And that this is a big issue at the school, actually, and also that your kid needs to get out from the back seat and all these different things. And this is, preschool, kindergarten, first graders. So seeing that need is so huge. So thank you for that work too. And then Kayla, I would just say my tattoos are covered right now. When you were pointing out all your tattoos and thinking about like what that means for you and like how that carries forward, I was feeling really connected to that too. So thank you all for all of these connections and for your work and sharing with us on this evening. And I don't know if the library has any other closing things before we close out. Aaron, is there anything else to announce or anything? Are we closing? I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, you're on. I'll just go make sure I'm on screen to see Darius. So if we don't have any more questions from the public, I think that we're good. Did anyone have any closing statements they would like to make? Yeah, it's like no.
Thanks for being here, everybody.
Yeah, so I
Thank
just
you,
want to say
everybody.
thanks to everyone online and in person who came. Thanks to Kayla and Jenna and Darius and Desiree for all being here. I'm really happy that we got to have this conversation.
Thanks for providing a safe space for us to do this.
Yes.
Yeah, so if anyone ever has ideas for other programs, I'm one of the adult librarians and I'm happy to take your input so we can do more cool things in the library.
Are there not adult librarians?
Youth librarians, yeah.
Yeah.
Teen librarians,
Oh, okay.
they're all downstairs.
Do you mean like there wasn't a librarian who wasn't an adult? Oh.
Well,
Can I volunteer my children?
That-
They would love it.
yeah. We do take assistance, yeah. Yeah, so thank you very much, Darius, for being here all the way from Oakland.
Thanks, Darius.
The EMU to Oakland pipeline.
Woo, woo.
Cool. All right, thank you all very much and have a great night.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you.
Woo, woo.
Thank you. I'm gonna turn that off.
Thank you for your pep talk.
You did fantastic. I could not tell it was your first time. So yeah.
That was great.
Oh, thank you. That's a high compliment.
Appreciate what you said you guys